I do see Peter, so Commissioner Wood, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Peter Wood. I'm an advisor neighborhood commissioner in Adams Morgan in Ward 1. To be honest, a lot of people have already said all of the important points. So I'm really just here to kind of reinforce a lot of what's been said by people here today, and really just from people in the community that I've talked to, both as commissioner. Also, I do some volunteering with end of life services, which kind of overlaps in terms of pain mediation. And as a former researcher who did some research on related subjects, really basically three questions I want to go over, just kind of give us a scope of what my perspective is, but also I think just kind of summarily what we've heard today. So one, just identifying what is the problem that we're hoping to fix. So, I mean, we even see it in the kind of words that are used throughout the media, throughout different policymaking circles of what we're talking about here. I would argue that it's not necessarily helpful to refer to what we're dealing with as an opioid and fentanyl crisis. The crisis isn't that opioids and fentanyl exist, it's that people are suffering and dying. Of course, the substances that lead to that are an important factor, but I think terminology and semantics really do matter. There are a couple aspects to the problem. One is obviously local. So locally, we can control the laws that we use, and we've seen the lasting effects of years of criminalizing matters of health, and the overdose crisis really reaffirms that when people are treated as criminals for behavior that is a health emergency, it doesn't get resolved. It often gets exacerbated. It often gets exacerbated for decades and generations, and we're continuously cleaning that up. A lot of that's also tied to really what I think is just lack of stability. We see that in a lot of people's testimony today, the little bit that I've been able to catch, which is things like displacement or housing instability, job loss, social instability, even other types of just lack of kind of a solid foundation in one's life. Those are things that either lead to or exacerbate the vulnerabilities that are a huge part of the overdose crisis. This is, I know, not new, but I think it's important to point out. But as I already kind of alluded to, overdoses are caused by various substances like opioids, fentanyl, xylazine. But I really think it's important. I think that I've heard it on a few occasions mentioned that it's not just about specific substances, it's about the dynamics which create those substances creating problems. Or kind of put differently, there's always going to be substances to fill in gaps in a system if the system is bad, and those substances are in some degree arbitrary. Of course, when we get into the chemistry and to the medical resources, the specifics do matter, but we need preventative care, not just reactive care. We need overdose care. We don't need further criminal policy to address something that just really isn't adequately addressed as a criminal matter. And just on the other scale, federally, of course, that's made complicated because Congress is kind of, especially when it's run by Republicans, but Democrats too, often attacking ideas like harm reduction and decriminalization, which could really pose to benefit a lot of people in DC and elsewhere. So second question, what are possible solutions? Generally speaking, resources, they need to be located where people need them. It's a complicated, often multifaceted question, but we often see that we can have investment, but it's not necessarily being placed in positions geographically that are advantageous to just incentivizing use or just increasing access to those. But kind of more broadly speaking too, I think that reducing stigma is really important. It's kind of an old trope, but I think it still bears repeating, which is we gotta win the public opinion battle, especially in DC, considering that we have this constant additional pressure from the federal government. We need to make it so we hold strong and really reduce those kind of social perspectives, which make it even harder to just address or even establish what the problem is in the first place. So third, last question, what can we use the funds that we have access to now? Well, how can they be best spent? It's of course a nice issue to have, which is you have money to spend. So I break it into those two kind of categories. Infrastructure, specifically put, I support overdose prevention sites. They need to complement mobile services. This is really important. I've heard one criticism saying that there's not enough research on overdose prevention sites. In my experience, this is kind of the opposite, that sobering centers, in juxtaposition with sobering centers, I think that sobering centers actually lacks the research, pretty well-established research, and you can go onto PubMed and check it out yourself, but they're important. Education and culture, I also think that that's kind of something that has to complement this. Overdose prevention, as a label I've heard, is often better than safe injection. Things like that can be really helpful just in terms of how we kind of market things, but without decriminalization of substance use, this money spent will be a short-lived bandage. It's instead of bandages, we need deeper change. We need empathy from our elected officials, which I do see coming, and I really want to applaud it. And we really need a culture of caring. That's all I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner.